Bueno, muy buenas tardes. Esto es otro episodio de la nueva normalidad. No, me adelanté, la nueva normalidad. Hoy es viernes 21 de agosto. Estamos ya terminando el mes de agosto. Todavía nos falta un par de programitas. 21 de agosto. Y bueno, tenemos una sesión muy especial, con un tema muy especial. Hoy la sesión va a ser en buena medida en inglés. Así que bueno, vamos a empezar a invitar a Raúl Garay Linares. Raúl, querido, buenas tardes. ¿Cómo estás?
¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? Buenas tardes. Qué linda oportunidad. La verdad que, bueno, estoy muy contento de esta gran oportunidad que tenemos de hablar con una de las más grandes escritoras, digamos, que tenemos hoy, con el tema de negocios, entrepreneurs y también el tema de cómo regenerar el planeta. Qué bueno.
Así que bueno, qué tarea esa, ¿no?
Wow.
Regenerar el planeta. También le pedimos a nuestra amiga, a Donna Patricia Eiby. Donna, querida, ¿cómo estás? Esperá que te voy a sacar el cartel porque te estoy tapando. Ahí está, vamos a pasar ya al formato este. Ahí está. Hola, Donna, querida, ¿cómo estás? No te escuchamos, a ver. Estás en mute. Ahora sí. Háblanos.
Hello, got it.
Ahora sí, ahora perfecto. Bueno,
Today from Australia.
Today from Australia. Bueno, así que bueno, la tenemos hoy de Regenerative Life, ¿no? Con Carol Sanford. Así que bueno, vamos a dar la bienvenida a Carol. Carol, muy buenas tardes. ¿Cómo estás?
Hello, Carol.
Yes, buenas tardes. So glad to be with you.
It's our pleasure, Carol. It's our pleasure. So, very interesting thing. But before we start, we really want you to tell the audience a little of your background. So, thank you for accepting this participation in our show. So, thank you very much. So, you are welcome here. So, tell us a little about your experience and your background.
Surely, happy to. And I wish I could speak your beautiful language, understand some. But anyway, it's delightful to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm going to give you a couple of highlights and then tell you more what I'm doing now. It's all the same thing, but it has an evolution. I was an entrepreneur, owned 2 businesses, one a real estate business, one a pattern design business, either sold those or I guess both of them I actually ended up selling. I then became a college lecturer, associate professor in a San Jose State University in California, where I taught graduate business students, urban planning, and information technology students. And I discovered I didn't do well in academic settings because I wasn't political enough. I said what I thought, and I got in all sorts of trouble. Because I had run 2 businesses, I decided that my work, and because I'd been in education, my work would be that of a business educator. So for 44 years now, I have been a business educator and a paradigm educator, which we'll get into a bit. I run an institute which does research. I run a summit which holds events for people who are in the other thing I run, which is I have communities. One, the Regenerative Business, which works with teams of business leaders over a long period of time. I used to go out into companies and do that. Now we do 15 businesses at one time, monthly over a long period of time. I run another community called Change Agent Community, people who want to do like what Donna and I do, it sounds like, and maybe Stephen Raul too, where we go to help organizations, and we're in a resourcing role. And then I run one for education and one for women entrepreneurs. So now my major work is in community development that are kind of ongoing. I've written 5 books, all with different publishing platforms. 2 of them are bestsellers. Every one of them has won at least one major international award for the quality of the book. I run 4 podcasts. So I get to do a little bit of what you're doing and hoping I'll learn from you today. I publish on Medium regularly, and I'm sure there's other stuff that I get up to, but maybe that gives you enough of an idea. One other thing, the nature of what I do has changed from being only business to changing, understanding what people told me, which is everything I teach applies to everything. So I run one of my podcasts, Business Second Opinion, which you can find anywhere, critiques popular ideas like those that are in Harvard Business Review and gives an alternative suggestion. And I have parents listening to it and applying it to child development. I have government officials listening. I have designers, educators, media people. So my work is about building the capacity to think more completely, more consciously, to work on yourself. And I do that in so many arenas, I can't even list them. How's that for a start, Steve?
No, very well. Excellent, excellent. So, well, thank you for that introduction. That is a very amazing history, amazing story of life. My first question has to do with the future of the CEO role. So, how can you tell us about that evolution for the CEOs?
Well, if I go back and look at what a CEO was originally, they were more of a COO. They ran the company every day. And then as we got past the Industrial Revolution and we had investors in the whole securities exchange in every country, somebody had to manage the shareholders, right? And the regulatory and the context that had to do with the world around them. Then eventually the CEO's role became a lot with dealing with the public as well, because the public was disturbed by many things businesses were doing. And so the CEO then managed just the shareholder, people who gave them money, and the people who had a stake in what they were doing, they'll put pressure on them to do something better. I believe that we are in a very new era. I think the shareholders and the people who care will stay there, but there is a merging happening with what the investor wants and what the community of citizens want. That is starting to be seen. So I believe that the new role, and we were talking earlier about Chad Holliday, president, CEO, and chairman of the board of DuPont. Chad and I used to have this conversation in our community about the role of a CEO really was a paradigm shifter, helping people understand they needed to move from the old paradigm to the new paradigm. And let me tell you what that means. And I know later we're going to come back and talk a little more about how you do that with people. But 125 years ago, the world changed as much as it did when Galileo told us that the sun didn't revolve around us. That was a huge paradigm shift, right? Okay, we are not the center of the universe. We are a moving object in it. And that was centuries ago, right? 5, I believe. I forgot to go count. We had 125 years ago a similar paradigm shift that 99.9% of people don't know happened, and they're still in the Industrial Revolution. So that shift came about when Einstein, people know who that guy is, right? Albert Einstein, and a guy named David Bohm, who was one of his students. And Einstein called him his spiritual son because he felt like Bohm, as a physicist, was bringing something new to him. And a guy named Heisenberg, they all figured out something that's not taught in school yet. We're very, very slow at adopting new paradigms. Now, what that was that we were no longer in the world of the billiard ball paradigm. I named it that. we were in the world of the field regenerating paradigm. So let me describe what each of those are to with a metaphor. So the way I describe the billiard ball paradigm is Newtonian. It's all the laws of entropy, gravity, everything's breaking down, falling apart. But the way you can understand it quickly, because it takes a long time to get your mind to go there, is think of yourself in whatever role you do as a cue stick. I am a cue stick. I am going to hit you, the billiard ball, where I want you to go, and you're going to go into the pocket I aim you for. So that's the way most of us think change happens. We decide what's going to happen. We decide to demonstrate, to make laws, to do something that will put it where it's supposed to be. And of course, we all know that it never goes quite in the pocket we wanted. It goes into another pocket or no pocket at all, or it bounces back. So trying to create policy that hits the pocket doesn't work. So the billiard ball can't be directed the way we think it can. And we are not a very good cue stick, because when we hit it, it doesn't go where we thought. That paradigm is because none of that works. That is not how reality works. So what David Bohm wrote a wonderful book, if you like reading about this, called Wholeness and the Implicate Order. And what he was describing there is that we are actually one big continuum. Everything I do affects you. It affects my investment. I'm hearing feedback. It is a world that is moving not by direct impact, but by indirect. He called it the implicate. So now let me describe to you what implicate means, because the new paradigm is what I call field generation, which is, and it doesn't quite work with the billiard ball example, but I'll show you. It would mean you'd create the right kind of field around it so that the billiard ball would begin to understand how the world worked, and it would be able to choose a pocket that worked for everything. Of course, the physical world doesn't work that way, but it does in the human and the living systems world. So let me give you 3 examples. First, we all know that culture affects how people behave, what they believe, what they do. So Raul, I know you live in Brazil. It sounds like, Donna, you live in Australia. Is that true? Steve, where do you live?
Me?
Yeah.
In Mexico.
In Mexico. And I live in the States. That's 4 completely different cultures.
Yeah.
And we are partly who we are because we grew up in that culture. I have also, and I think maybe you and many of your listeners have traveled around the world. When I go to Greece, where I worked a great deal, or to Belgium, or to South Africa, I can feel a culture shock when I come back into the States. It's like physically, I can feel it. And it's a mixture of, well, it's nice to be home, but it's also, I hate to lose what I felt in that culture. And the same thing happens in companies. And there's a lot of talk about what it means to create a culture. But for the most part, people try and create a culture with the billiard ball model. Decide we're going to move people around, or decide we're going to change incentives, or decide that we're going to bring in something from the outside. The cue stick hits the cue ball and expects it to go in the cultural pocket we want it to go in. The way you create culture is to, and we'll talk about this a bit more later, is indirect. That cue stick model is direct. I have to hit it or it doesn't move. We now know that's not true. 125 years, even in physics, it's not true. So I do a lot of work with organizations on learning how culture works. That's the first thing that's an example of the new paradigm. The second one is capability. So each of us here went to school somewhere. We probably got a series of degrees. I did doctoral work, master's work, undergraduate work. I have since then done all sorts of capability building. That changed who I am. It changes what I can do, what I can be. And I go into companies, and instead of trying to rearrange the culture with my cue stick, right, my program, my green belt, blue belt, black belt program, instead I build capability for people to think differently. That thinking differently is a field shift, a paradigm change, which causes people to choose to behave differently. I don't work directly on behavior because I am a quantum change agent, which is what Einstein created, right? Quantum theory. So you can change culture, you can change capability. Just think what it would be like if we educated in thinking and self-management every human being who was born in the 4 countries we represent. Would that change the world? I think so, because being able to have people have new capability to feel smarter. They're already pretty smart, but to feel smarter changes how the culture works. Now, there's a third thing that is part of the new paradigm, and that is working on consciousness. That's what David Bohm brought to Einstein, which was, if I am able to see myself, it's like a part of me gets up here and watches this part of me who's talking. And I'm saying, and I'm doing this, I'm thinking about, and I'm reminding myself to talk more slowly. That's me introducing my consciousness while I watch me. I say, there's a way I want to be, and I'm going to watch me so I can manage me to be that way. In other words, I am my own cue stick, and I am also the cue ball, and I determine what the pocket is. But you have to build consciousness and the capacity for consciousness to do that. I believe that the next work of CEOs is making the paradigm shift into the 20th century. Well, into the 21st century, but out of the 20th century. So I don't know. What do you think of that? Does that sound weird? Do you have a reflection on that, Donna?
Well, certainly, Carol, I've got a question for you, because you're saying this is 125 years. We've had this around for a long time. You have been working on this issue for a significant number of decades.
Yep.
So my first question is, did you see a change and where it actually worked?
Oh, yeah.
And secondly, with the pandemic, we've had a significant disruption. I think we'd all agree.
Yeah.
Where is there an opportunity as we move the liminal threshold, that threshold into something new? Is it an opportunity for us to bring some of and refresh some of these ideas and adopt them?
Right. Absolutely. So I have written 5 books, which are 80% stories of how this worked. So I wanted to make sure people knew about them. So since we were talking about Chad Holiday earlier, we worked in something called the titanium dioxide business, which Raul probably knows about and remembers. And it was a mining operation and a production operation. Now, when we started, everybody said to me, why are you working with these evil people? They take down mountains, they contaminate rivers and streams. Are you going to go in and you're going to work on them and get them to see this and beat them up and have them understand they've got to stop? And I said, I'm going to go in and work with them. And after we have this conversation for a year or so, they're going to see that. And I'm never going to mention it. I'm going to use the quantum indirect approach. So I educated them about systems thinking from a living systems view, not a machine systems view. And I said, let's look at the essence of mining. Now, that's an idea which most people don't know about, that every process has a core way that if it were done, it would be effective and efficient at the same time. And I said to them, we're going to look at the way to invent and create a whole new proprietary process for making titanium dioxide, TiO2. They said, great. And in there, you notice I didn't mention sustainability. I didn't mention social justice. I didn't mention anything that was a problem in the business at that time. But I showed up every month for a couple of days and I educated them on looking at systems effects in terms of the business. And one day a guy came in and said, I just realized you're asking us questions to put the community in there and reflect on that. I said, yeah, you want to look at that? And my first book has this story. And so they started looking at the stakeholder pin pad I had, which had to do with what we do for customers, how we work with co-creators, employees, how Earth is affected, how community is affected, and investors. And as they begin to keep going around and doing their own reflection, me never commenting, never telling them what they should think, they begin to say, wait, I'm seeing, I just occurred to me, the kind of complaints we're getting from people about the entailing process of the debris that was being washed into rivers isn't part of your pin pad. And I said, talk more, say more. So I didn't say, yes, you finally got it, right? That would be the billiard ball. I'll get him to see it. I said, tell me how you got to that. His own discovery got the whole team, and Chad became a part of that later. He was not there at the beginning, about what it meant to look at a stakeholder view. Then we did the essence of mining and the essence of TiO2. And that story takes a little too long to tell, but generally, once we understood how ore became titanium dioxide, we understood that you didn't have to use high-grade ore. High-grade ore means you take down 90% of the mountain and use 10% of what you took down. So we, in this process, not me educating on how to think, they said, wait a minute, it's possible to use really low-grade ore to do this. But that's a whole new way of thinking about it. Nobody else knows how to do that. That would cut our costs 90%. It would mean we'd take down 90-something% less of a mountain. It would mean we would have a whole new proprietary, trademarkable process that no one else would own. And that would give us a margin that goes from 5%, which mining is, didn't give you much margin, to 65%. And we would not take down much of a mountain. We now could invent a process instead of deep well drilling. We don't have that kind of leftover material to deal with. So they helped form new legislation in Washington, which stopped deep well drilling because they had discovered a way to do it. So I showed them how to get what they wanted, better than what they wanted, be able to do something amazing, then discover everything else. And I never once mentioned what they should do, cue ball into the cue pocket, right? I never once affirmed them and said, you guys are so good, I'm so proud of you. I always said indirectly, because if I'd said you're good guys, I'm a cue ball hitting a cue stick, hitting a cue ball. I'm continuing to aim them. Instead, I kept saying, well, how did you get to that idea? I was indirectly building their capability to create the ship. Does that make sense, Donna, as an example? And then I'll work on your second.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the idea of creating and changing systems is something that, and not being the cue stick, particularly when you're a consultant. You're coming into an organization, it's easy to be the cue stick. And actually, sometimes people would say we're not.
I was going to say, that's why I refuse to be a consultant. I have never, ever, ever been a consultant. I will not give advice. I will not tell people what to do, but I'll educate you to figure it out. Okay, sorry, keep going.
Yeah. No, I think that's fantastic, because the other challenge with that is that people may say, well, what are you doing? Do you know what I mean? Did that ever happen to you? I'm paying you all this money and you're kind of...
Well, I never was a consultant. So no, everyone said to me, this is magical. It was right under our nose all the time.
Yeah.
Now you had a second question. Do you want me to speak to that, the pandemic?
Yeah, where the changes, and actually I'd be very interested in what's the same. that we could squander by just not making any changes to how we think and how we.
I'm not sure we can do anything without changing our thinking, because that was true. Now that's the same, because it was true before and it's still true. But here's what's true about change, which is the word that stood out about what you were saying. The theory of change that we have is this cue ball, where really what we want to be able to do is have a theory of change that's indirect, that starts with disruption. Now, we just have a massive disruption right now. When I go into a company or a neighborhood, because I'm an economist and often I'm doing economic development work, I don't ever go in with a program, but I go in with a way to disrupt. And the disruption is an assessment often of, here's a way to assess yourselves. Would you like to do that? And that assessment process is very disruptive. The kind of questions I ask, the kind of frameworks I give them, I challenge their mental models, what they're currently holding, by giving them a framework to look at and ask them to question it. So again, I don't tell them what's wrong. I don't assess them. I don't interview them. That'd be a cue stick on the cue ball, heading them toward a pocket, right? Instead, I let them discover, as the cue stick, what they want to hit in themselves and where they want to go. Now we have a disruption. Everybody is disrupted. Yay, glorious, hallelujah. I am so excited. And I may die in the middle of it, and I'm still excited, because it creates people being willing to let go of their current patterns without so much agony. It usually takes me a year to 2 years to 3 years to disrupt it. I learned how powerful disruption was when I went to South Africa, or Southeastern Africa, with Colgate-Palmolive, as Mandela was coming off of Robben Island, had just been elected prime minister, president. And in that process, I was able to work at a rate that was like 10 times faster than I had ever been able to do in States or in Europe or in a Western educated world, which includes most of the Spanish-speaking world, because they were deeply colonized, right? So in that process, what I'm doing is taking advantage of a disruption. Apartheid is being taken apart, new constitution. And one of the things, I'm going to give you another example. So, because you said, does this work? So here's an example of why it worked there that I think will speak to why it'll work now. South Africa had a new constitution that said the top of every corporation must look like the population as a whole. Now, the population as a whole was 95% Black Africans. It was 3% white Africans. Well, what did the top of companies look like? And particularly those that were expat kind of companies. And you had 5 years to flip that and get it 95% Black Africans leading the company. The companies were fighting and saying, but these people are uneducated. They weren't allowed to go to school for 100 years. What are we going to do? Well, I introduced to people the idea that we could look at what's the essence of education. And the essence of education is to draw out of people what it is that they can do, can be, and want to contribute. And within 6 months, one thing in between, we had a group who organized to figure out how to do that. And what they said was, wait a minute, education is one way of discovering that. Another way is leadership. So they created an equivalency of, you could go through some European type school, which were the white African schools, or you could have been a leader in Soweto or Alexandria or in a political campaign, and all of that counted on your resume. And so it took us 6 months to flip that to 97% Black Africans on top. And there was no layoff. None of the white Africans were going to leave. One did. He just couldn't get his mind around it. But we were growing the revenue of Colgate in this process 35 to 65% a year, while we transformed some parts of Soweto and Alexandria Township oral health care, because this was Colgate I was working with. And so it's like what we did with, I told you, with DuPont. We did this with Colgate, and none of it was a cue stick to a cue ball. It was all building capability, introducing culture change. And it happened so fast because we had a disrupted environment and everybody knew they had to change. We've got that now. We have to seize it.
Oh, hello. Well, let me ask you about your new book. That's the meaning of a regenerative life. I know that you collect. I know you collect a lot of stories. That the one that you share with us. That's the great stories. And in this book, you collect a lot of stories about non-heroic leadership, and 9 roles in this situation. Could you please explain more about that 9 roles?
Yes. Let me tell you how I got to this book, because it's based on research. The stories that are in the book, which I will tell you some about, were a part of an action learning project. I invited around the world. I had someone off of every continent, Africa, Deep Pacific. We had someone out of India, out of Japan, all across Europe, Middle East, and then, of course, across the States. So we had people who joined and said, I love this idea of a non-heroic leadership model. I'm exhausted. I've been an activist. I've led a company. I've tried so hard to create change. And I explained to them the cue sticks trying to hit cue balls get tired. It is so much work that there was another method. So for 6 months, I engaged 140 people in learning the new way. And they got online with me for an hour. They went out and tried an idea that I gave them a framework to develop. They applied it to their current role, their current career. And then they came back and they said, oh my gosh, that was so hard. Here's my problem. We talked. I gave them a bit more education. They developed some more and they went out into the world. And I said, now, I want you to write a story for me. And here's a template for writing that up based on what you learned. So the stories that first we discovered these 9 roles, which can, with a non-heroic effort, be instrumental, I would say, in bringing about major change from your everyday role. All right. So those stories are in the book, and people wrote. If you buy the book, you'll see at the front, there are quotes from, I think, everybody who was in the book. We might have missed one or two. Now, what are those roles, right? That'd be your next question.
Yeah.
What we discovered was there were 3 clusters of roles. Okay. The first 3, and I'll tell you what those are. The first 3 were what I call the initiators.
Initiation. Okay.
They build the ground for something to happen. They build the foundation on which it stands. So I'll tell you what those are and you'll see why. The first one was parent.
Okay.
If parent is foundational to the kind of culture and society and capability, but the parent, after the child is grown, they don't have much to do. They're the foundation. A second one is the designer. And by the way, you can be in a parenting role and are not a parent. I raised 8 children, but I gave birth to 2. So I acquired children. 4 of them became my acquired children. One of them, I paid for her college. I paid for her wedding. I call her my daughter. Her children call me grandma. That I was in a parenting role. So it isn't about the life role. It's about the way you do it. Designer is the same way. You might be an engineering supervisor, but you can become a designer of meetings or a designer of products or a designer of engagement with the people who report to you. If you can learn to understand what design is about. And that you can also do that if you are a parent. You could be a designer. If you're, I write scripts for podcasts because I run so many of them, right? And I'm a designer when I'm in that role. Then the third one that's foundational, but the reason it's foundational, initiator, is once it's designed, it's gone. It was a foundational piece and it no longer is there. You're going to see the others don't go away.
Okay.
So the third of those initiators is earth tender.
Mm-hmm.
You care for earth and you can speak earth's language. If you think about regenerative agriculture, farmers who know how to regenerate soil and understand the essence of their part of the world in its soil, they don't actually grow the plants, but they build the soil from that understanding. They also can educate us because we don't know how to see life. We see billiard balls and we see pockets. And so we don't know how to see something alive. We only see this machine-like idea. The earth tenders have a role of educating all of us about how life and living systems work. All right, that's the first three. You want me to keep going?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Could you please give an example of your stories about the initiator?
Yeah, let me give you one of designer.
Okay.
So I had a young person who was in this, who what their normal job was a teacher, so they taught high school kids. And they realized that the way they were working was not really enlivening the kids. And they decided that they want to get the kids involved in the design of their own curriculum. Okay. And in that process, they decided they would also build a small business that would be growing vegetables. So they had a little earth tender in it, right? But most people who are just teaching, they're in the role of giving the curriculum. You do this, you're told what to do, the school board designs it. All of that same content got understood, but it came from a different design and teaching the kids to design and also pulling in a little earth tender. That story, I'm trying to remember the person, it was Brandon, I think. You can read his story in here about how profoundly and he actually ended up winning a Teacher of the Year award. And he said, I would have never taken the risk to do that if we hadn't been in this project. I was so determined to be a, quote, good teacher. I have content, the cue stick. I have students, the cue ball. And I have measures we're supposed to have on the end, the pocket, right? So we gave him a quantum way. That one clear?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So how about you want to hear the second of the three?
Second role, the second cluster of roles.
Yeah, the second set. There are, of course, there are these people. Oh, okay.
Just one point, because Donna has to go to the airport. So
my goodness,
okay.
I'm so happy to meet you. I would love to.
Oh, yeah, continue this conversation for sure. It is fantastic. It is just, I love it. I love it.
I'm so glad.
It's fantastic. It was an honor to meet you, and thank you for inviting me today to participate. And
if you know anyone who would like to buy 5 books and send me the receipt, they can go do the project that I put these 140 people through on their own. I recorded it. And anyone who's listening to me on a broadcast, I invite to do this. Come learn about the regenerative life, like the example I just gave you. So 5 books, you can buy it all over the world. You send me the receipt at carolsanford.com. I'll give you the link to watch the video, and you'll have like 3 months to do it on your own. Just wanted you to know about that before you left.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you very much.
Great.
And bye, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve, for stopping. I would have felt very sad not to say goodbye.
You changed the name of my friend is Néstor, not Steve.
Oh, Néstor. Oh, I love that.
Don't worry,
Yeah.
don't worry.
Oh, but I like to have your name because your name is symbolic of who you are. I mean, I don't know what that might translate to in Spanish. Can you tell me? Does it have a meaning?
Which
The
one?
meaning of Néstor or
His name, yes. Néstor.
Is the greatest.
The great. Did you make that up?
No.
yeah.
Okay. You know, so we'll come back. I'm coming back to your question, Raul. I haven't forgotten. But
not problem.
To define regeneration, I talk about nested holes. And there's the greater whole, there is the parallel whole, and there's the inner whole that does the work. So you are the greater whole, the greatest in the nested system. I will never forget your name now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
All right. So the second set of the 9 roles, I call manifestors. Because they continue to do things. They don't build the ground, although there are manifestors who build the ground at the same time. So none of these are mutually exclusive. But the manifestors are entrepreneurs, economic shapers. They change how economies work by how they invest, how they pass laws, regulations, everything that controls economies. And the third one is citizen. And if you aren't an ongoing good citizen forever, you are not manifesting a working democracy, which we all four live in more or less a working democracy, right? Not perfect, but certainly it takes us being citizens. So those 3 roles are what I call the manifestors. And an example, you like examples of this, right? I had a young woman who was the CEO in Canada of a company which works with food waste. And she's the one that sparked this idea of the new role of CEO. She said, because in what I put in the education piece I did for the 140 participants, I said that the essence of entrepreneur is to shift paradigms. Think about what they do. If they do what everybody else is doing, it's kind of ordinary. They don't do anything that's really entrepreneurial. But if they can step into another paradigm, and in our case a moment ago, get out of the cube billiard ball one into the field culture creating one, everything can change. So Alexa was her name. She went back into her company and she engaged them from a model of learning about how paradigms work and asked them to keep inventing ways to run that were in the new regenerative paradigm. I actually have 4 paradigms, and what she did is watch how creative people became, how much they invented a new way to work, how much they invented a new way to serve customers and also their employees and their suppliers. And so once she really connected with this idea of paradigm shift, it transformed her role as CEO and everybody in the company. And in the country, she was acknowledged and engaged by political leaders who said, do more of that. That's amazing. And during the pandemic, they have been feeding people who would go hungry, all with this new paradigm of, it's almost like loaves and fishes out of the Bible, right? You can make much more out of what you got if you can think from a new paradigm. So there's the second 3. So you want me to do the third 3 or you want me to pause? Nope, keep going. All right, Néstor says keep going. The third 3 I call the disruptors. Buying from outside. They bring something in. Now, there's a condition you have to meet to be my definition of a regenerative disruptor, which is you have to love that which you are disrupting and love it permanently. You don't get to come in and create chaos and go off and leave it. No, I do a lot of disruption with people like we're doing right now, right? You can see my whole world is about disrupting people's current thinking. But when I do, right, well, you asked me to come. I felt like I made a commitment to you not to really make sure something worthy happened. I decided I had to love you enough not to come in and be mean and make things just upsetting. I have to give people a way they can go work with it. So when people join my communities, I dedicate my life to them as long as I'm alive. And now I can disrupt them. So there are 3 disruptors. The first one is educator.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're really, truly an educator, you're using the Latin version of educare. I don't know what it is in Spanish or Portuguese, but I bet educare also has something to do with drawing out or drawing through. It's conductive, like duct tape conducts electricity. So if you're a real educator, the essence of it is about developing intelligence of everyone you touch. I play an educator role a lot. I play it in universities where I teach. I play it in corporations where I'm an educator from the outside to the inside. I play it with primary schools and particularly alternative schools, because that can be a disruptor role young for kids. The second of the disruptor roles, so there's the educator, is media content creator. So media disrupts us, and it does it without caring. It only does it usually, although you guys are creating media, and this is not true of you, they do it to help reality be more evident, for people to see what the truth is, to make their own good understanding happen. So one of my participants in this study, and she wrote a foreword to the book, is a person who is the host of a national public radio favorite show called Here and Now. So you probably wouldn't have heard it because it doesn't broadcast outside the US, maybe into Canada a little ways. But it is a role that is, the media content creator is a role about making people more able to discern, to see, to make sense of things, not to be programmed, not to be excited and to make you mad and make you hate the other group. That's not what media is about. So I am a media content creator. I'm prolific media content creator, right? I have 5 books, and I'm working on a novel right now to disrupt Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, to displace that book, which is a bestseller in every language on the planet almost. And the reason is that it's filled with lies. It's not true. And I want people to be able to hold up what I'm writing to be able to see it. So I'm playing that role. And Tanya, who did the foreword to the book, and said, I love that idea. I'm going to take that. And she's an African-American Black woman. She also runs a podcast called Truth Be Told. And she said, wow, okay, if I hold that idea of truth be told, and most of our audience are Black Americans, then could I also help it be broad so that everyone can learn to see the truth? So the third of the disruptor roles is spirit resource. To be a resource to Raul's spirit, Néstor's spirit, Donna's spirit, everyone on this call. So when you leave here, hopefully what I've done is enough spirit resource that, as you said, when you said, we're going to inspire people. Well, I think what we're going to do is give them things to inspire themselves, because they begin to see what they could do, what they could be. And I want inspiration to come from them and me just be a resource to that. And I run a whole group of a couple hundred people on every planet. I've got a handful of people out of Mexico City. I've got some out of Chile. I've got people out of the Middle East, out of Europe, out of the deep Pacific, out of Japan. All of them are coming to attend to learn to be a spirit resource, which means returning people to themselves as the source. So hopefully you can accept me as an example for the moment. How does your spirit feel as we talk in this call? Do you have a reflection on what it's doing for you?
Yes, it inspires me a lot. I remember you remember the work that I done with Charlie Cron.
Yep.
And he was one of my teachers in life. And some of the words that resonate more in my brain is the regenerative way of thinking.
Right.
That's I feel fantastic. So could you explain in some brief which is this philosophical way of thinking?
Okay, what regenerative means. All right,
yeah.
I'm going to give you a 7-word definition.
Okay, it's great.
And then I'll contrast it to things it's not, because people will listen and think they're doing that, and they're not usually.
Okay.
So the definition is evolved capacity for essence expression via systems actualization. All right, I'm going to break that apart, right? And you have to listen to it from a quantum mind, not a billiard ball mind, because people will say, well, I'm doing regeneration because I'm stopping carbon waste, and I'm reducing my footprint, and I'm working against racism. Those are not regenerative. They're not necessarily awful things, but regenerative means you would be evolving capacity. You would give people more capability to think systemically in a whole way so they could come to what they need to work on, like I did with the mountain with DuPont. And when you were done working with them, they would be more able. They would have more capacity to do something on their own, not just something that was done. So evolve the capacity of everything you touch. Now, how do you do that?
Wow.
My next 2 words are through essence expression. So everything I touch, I want to see its essence and bring that out. I want Raul and Néstor to know what their essence is and know how to express that in the world. I want every child to experience that. I want every life shed. I don't like the word watershed because it's anthropocentric, right? Human-centered. That's where my water comes from. So I call it a life shed. I want every city to know what its essence is, what the story of its place is. And I want to design from that. So if I had 8 children, which I helped raise, I had 2 by birth, I want all 8 of those, none to be like the other, none to be like anybody else, never to try and copy. I don't want them finding any role models. I want them finding themselves. And I want every business, when I start with the business, I find the essence of that founding and the business, and I help them express that. Do you know what the essence of DuPont is? I went back to the founding with EI DuPont, with Chad, with a group of folks, and we came to understand that this is in, which book is this in? I think it's in my first book, The Responsible Business. We realized that EI DuPont had imbued it with managing risk. So when you work for DuPont, you always had to be safe, right?
Yes.
So and the problem was when I got there, they were managing risk by cue sticks against a cue ball called a site manager into a pocket called a program, rather than having them become more able to see how their essence would go about bringing about a safe work environment and managing risk. We started to redesign the safety program. You may have even been still there when that happened. We used essence. All right, so essence expression. So we got 4 of the words, right? Number 6, 7, and 8 is through or via systems actualization. All right, so you know about self-actualizing, right? Abraham Maslow, he borrowed that idea from Charlie Cron by the day. They were neighbors. So Abraham Maslow didn't create the term self-actualizing. Charlie Cron did. But Charlie was a generous person. He never complained about it. He just mentioned it over wine one night. And what he said was, the reason I don't care is that's the small idea. And if you work on self-actualizing, you're working on people to make individuals successful. And you can do a lot of that, and they will be better. But you'll be much better if you system actualize. You say, what's the essence of the tax system? What's the essence of the education system? And how do we bring that into existence? Because that gets away from the cue stick and to make the system, the culture, right, the capability, the consciousness, move everything much faster, like I did in South Africa, much, much faster, because you're not working directly, you're working in the quantum world indirectly.
Great.
That's how I define regeneration.
Wow, great. Thank you. That's very, very, very good.
I have a question. I think this question could be just to be finishing on your final reflection. Why do we need this paradigm shift?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because the old one's a lie. And we have so many things going wrong. We're building it off of something that we could only, at the level we could understand it until 125 years ago. Then Einstein arrived and said, I can image this, and it's not right. And it took 50 years before anybody could prove that what he was saying was right. But we need to work with how living systems work. If we're going to have a planet and social systems which are healthy and vital, and that's why we need to learn to do the paradigm shift.
Perfect. Interesting.
Wow.
Carol, your final reflection, something that you want to leave for us and for the people who is with us attending this.
So I said I was going to offer them an opportunity if they buy 5 books. You can send me an email and carol@carolsanford.com, and you can join the project. Now, you do it with videos. It's no longer live, but you'll get a lot out of it. People have been doing it and get a lot out. If you want a book club, you can buy 100 of them, and then you get actual 6 more hours and a workbook for your company to be able to do it. And I've had a bunch of people doing that, and it's really amazing. I hope you do go join my newsletter so you can learn about, like I will announce that I was here with you. I have people who were in the Spanish-speaking world, my friends who joined today. So and go join Business Second Opinion and listen to that podcast. That'll keep you busy for quite a while.
So what is the address so I can write it and show it in the screen?
All right. So 2 things. My website is carolsanford.com. That one's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
My email is carol@carolsanford.com. It's all about me.
Okay.
So I don't answer questions by email, but I often send people resources, or I can see they would be a good fit in one of my communities. Make sure there's no E's in it, right? You got it. So if you are interested in one of my communities that I mentioned, you can find that on carolsanford.com. Scroll down. It'll take you to seed communities where there are a bunch of things going on.
Perfect. So thank you very much for your time, for all your knowledge, for your patience. Yes. So thank you very, very much. Your reflection, Raul, what do you think?
Well, I feel really fantastic because what Carol said, it's resonate the teaching of Krohn. Also, it reminds me that my purpose is to find something in the ethic field that is related with the caring or the ethic of caring. And this is more related with my field. I think that Carol can explain more words, but in my words, we need this kind of philosophy in our world in order to survive. And in order to survive, we need to change our paradigm. So the regenerative paradigm is better than the last one. So I appreciate your presence here, Carol. Thank you for accept our invitation.
Thank you.
Your generosity.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it greatly.
Thank you, Carol. And well, my final word is I like this idea of the regenerative life. I'm studying more and more of the three bottom line approach. Yes, the company is not just doing business to get profit, but also we have some responsibility with people and with the planet. Okay, so having a bigger idea about yes.
So go buy the copy of my first book, The Regenerative Business, because it was where I started, and it talked about how to put the one Chad Holiday did the forward to. Okay. It tells you how to put together and tells you tons of stories, including the DuPont story, on how to bring that kind of ethic in. And the regenerative business is based on caring. That's my third book, right? So this runs through everything I do. So I look forward to seeing what you two do in the world next.
Perfect. Bueno, thank you very much. And let me shift to Spanish. Bueno, gracias a todos. Esta fue una edición especial. Raúl quería tenerla a Carol. La verdad que es muy interesante lo que Carol plantea. Así que bueno, gracias para los que nos acompañaron en este episodio. Van a tener ahí la versión grabada para que después, si quieren volver a escuchar algún comentario más. Así que thank you, Carol, very, very much. Thank you, Raúl. And we'll see next time in this that we call la nueva normalidad. Okay, new normal.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Carol. Thank you.
Bye-bye, Raul.